Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I'm Debashis Basu. While filing for taxes for the financial year 21-22, active investors may have had some mixed feelings. While last year they probably had large gains and therefore they would have to pay capital gains taxes. This year, while filing taxes, they are probably at a loss because we are supposed to be in what is called a bear market. Now, it's an unpleasant feeling to fork out taxes for past gains while you're sitting on current losses. This may seem illogical, but it has been established by behavioral scientists that we humans feel the pain of loss much more than the pleasure of gain. The behavioralists, as they're called, have also identified a variety of other irrational behavior by us who are supposed to be rationals. For instance, we are always keen to have a very logical explanation for all events around us, no matter how complex. We also want to always establish a cause and effect relationship, even though it leads us to different kinds of fallacies. We love to extrapolate from the past, and we are always very, very keen to project about the future, about what's going to happen, about the war, about election results, about the markets, and so on. Among other behavioral biases, we are drawn to the negative news, and we cannot help but forecast the outcome of complex, multidimensional, ever-changing situations, no matter how many times we are wrong in the past. All these features are very easily visible when we try to read the stock market. Over the last 6 months, all these biases have found a fertile ground. Everywhere you look, people have a litany of woes to deal with. There's lots of negative news. The breadbasket of the world, which is Ukraine and Russia, is at war. Several third world countries in Asia and Africa are on the brink of a disaster under the impact of high inflation and as well as economic mismanagement. The US has reported inflation levels not seen in the last 40 years and has slipped into 2 successive quarters of negative growth, which is technically defined as a recession. Thanks to its heavy dependence on Russian gas, Europe is in a big mess. Headlines like these are a daily staple in the media. I'll read out something quite sensational. London only avoided a blackout last week by paying a record £9,724 per megawatts, more than 5,000% higher than the typical price, to briefly import electricity from Belgium. The famed German economic engine that was pulling Europe's economy is now sputtering. On the other hand, China, which along with the US was the main driver of world's economic growth till 2020, has been facing a severe slowdown exacerbated by its own mistakes. To combat rising inflation, the US and most other countries in the world are raising interest rates. Rising inflation, slowing growth, and as well as high inflation together act as cold, wet blanket for the market. That is the conventional wisdom, and quite right, because there's a lot of historical precedents for past market behavior which reeled under the impact of these 3 factors. A second piece of conventional wisdom is that when the US sneezes, emerging markets catch a cold. And yet, from a high around 4,800 or so in January, the S&P 500, the bellwether of US market, is down only 14.3%. Defying conventional wisdom, is actually up 10% from a low of 3,715, even as inflation and interest rates rose in the US. What about the Indian market? From a high of 18,600 or so in 19th October last year, the Nifty last week, that is last Friday, was 17,200 or so, down just 7.5%. Yes, only 7.5%, even though 4 software stocks which comprise the index, and they have been driving the index in the last 2 years or so, are down quite sharply. That's TCS, HCL Technologies, Tech Mahindra and Infosys. There are 2 lessons here. One, the US has sneezed, but we have not caught cold. Now, this would probably be the first time something like this has happened. But if this is called a regime change, this does happen all the time in the markets. Something that goes on for a few years or a few decades suddenly stops happening and something else happens. So we are down, just as I said, just about 7.5%, and that's no recession, that's no bear market at all. And yet it feels as if the market has gone down by about 20-25% or so. Why is that so? Because of several behavioral biases again that I mentioned earlier. One, we are a magnet for bad news, and that's a bias that gets magnified by social and traditional media. There is a second behavioral bias. As I mentioned before, we always seek constant cause and effect correlations. Bad economic news, we think, will lead to a lower stock market prices. Well, what's wrong with that? It's simply this: a stock market is a market for stocks, and stocks are driven by the business performance, not by our own anxiety about the torrent of bad news that we read everywhere. Now, have we checked how this pervasive bad news is affecting the actual performance of companies, which alone will drive stocks and therefore the market? For the June quarter, Reliance Industries reported a 46% increase in net profit in a bad quarter. ICICI Bank's net profit was up 55%. Larsen & Toubro declared a 45% increase, and Asian Paints 70% increase in net profit. These are very large blue chip mega cap companies. Sure, this is a comparison over June of 2021, when the Omicron, or rather Delta wave of COVID had swept India. But if we don't dismiss the strong performance being reported by most companies as a change from the low base of last year, we will have to stop worrying. And we will have to admit things are much better now. But we are reluctant to do that. What I'm saying is by no means a prediction of where the market is headed. All I'm saying is that we have to simply read the data, what the data is telling us, and form opinions based on data alone, and not on the basis of conventional wisdom or news flows or our own biases. A relatively new theory about the market says that stock markets are complex, emerging, and adaptive systems. Right? Unlike in physical sciences, the basic structure of the market and their interrelationships can undergo a change, which can negate even proven notions. But human minds are not naturally adept in dealing with such basic changes. We love stability, we love our theories, and we want to live with our own biases. That's all from me for now. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please do share and subscribe to this channel. Thank you again.